chair today's meeting.
Okay.
So I call to order the Community Development Committee on May 21st. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for our special meeting of May 16th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We've got minutes. Our next agenda item is 218-126. It's a same week agenda for the City of Shakopee Entertainment District Comprehensive Plan, and Angela Torres is here to present.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. Today I'll be presenting on the City of Shakopee's Entertainment District Comprehensive Plan amendments. As shown in Figure 1 of the staff report, Thrive MSP 2040 gives the City of Shakopee community designation of Suburban Edge. The area affected by the amendment is shown in red, representing the locations of Valley Fair and Canterbury Park. As shown in Figure 2 of your staff report, this map shows regional systems in relation to the amendment site. The amendment defines allowed uses within the entertainment district, adding the possibility of up to 10% of the land area within the district for residential purposes. The amendment also defines other allowed uses complementary to the entertainment use found at Valley Fair and Canterbury Park. This includes restaurants, hospitality, entertainment, office tech, office flex, medical, retail, commercial, and recreational uses. There is a maximum potential for residential uses on 25 acres at Valley Fair and 45 acres at Canterbury Park. That's the 10%, which is 70 acres of the 700-acre sites. The first phase of the Canterbury Commons project includes approximately 600 units of high-density residential development. This is the city's proposed land use map, again identifying the area where the entertainment district applies. It is Figure 3 of your staff report. And staff finds that the proposed amendment conforms to regional system plans, is consistent with council policies, is compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. And the proposed action is as follows. Adopt the attached review record and allow the City of Shakopee to place the Entertainment District Comprehensive Plan Amendment into effect. Find that the amendment does change the city's forecasts. The city will address all forecast adjustments, community-wide and TAZ forecasts through the city's 2040 Comprehensive Plan update, and advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for regional park, forecasts, and housing. And then with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Any questions, members? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions, but just a comment. I'm very, very happy to see this. This is not only my home district, it's my hometown, and it's something that's very much needed. There's a significant housing shortage, particularly in the rental market, and so this will have a very, very big impact on the community. And with that, I would like to move the item.
Second.
With a first and a second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Angela.
Thank you very much.
Our next item of business is 2018-117. It's a same week agenda item. It's to amend the guidelines for the housing policy performance scores. Folks, since Tara Beard presented this 2 weeks ago and we took this up at our special meeting last week, there won't be a presentation today, but Tara's here to help council members with any questions you may have. Councilmember Elkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know, reflecting back on our meeting last week, one of the things that kind of hit me was that the effect of all of the caps that we have in different places throughout there, that they tend to flatten everything out and make the scores less of a differentiating factor than they might otherwise be. And there are so many different caps and limits in there that I think it just tends to compress all of the scores. And I think it waters down, I think, the potential impact of the application of the scores. So just something, this is probably our last bite at this apple, but something to think about for the future.
Council members, as you know, the scores help us analyze local community applications, and they also account for 7% of the regional solicitation for federal transportation dollars. And I want to thank Tara and the working group from Metro Cities and many of our municipal partners in looking at how we can improve the scores to better advance affordable housing in the region. With that, would any members of the working group like to talk about the changes that were made?
I'll move approval if nobody else has anything to say.
Is there a second?
Second? Mm-hmm.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We've got revised guidelines. Thank you, Tara.
Council approval.
Folks, with both of those same week agenda items, both will go on the non-consent.
Mm-hmm.
Terry Smith is here to talk about moving to work.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Terry Smith. I'm the director of the Council's Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the Moving to Work program. Where's my clicker? So what is Moving to Work? Moving to Work is a program, is a demonstration program. It was enacted by Congress and it was launched in 2008 by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Authority. The program permits public housing authorities with great flexibilities in how they operate both public housing and Section 8 programs around the country. It's really the purpose of it was to design and test innovative strategies, really changing the way that housing authorities administer federal rent assistance. The program allows housing authorities, which I will refer to going forward as PHAs, with the ability to waive federal regulations and program rules, and it also provides flexibility in how federal funds are spent. There are 39 housing authorities across the nation that currently have an MTW designation, and the map here shows those 39 housing authorities. It's quite small, but the bulk of them are located on the east and west coasts. Most are considered defined by HUD as large housing authorities. There are 3,300 PHAs nationally, so you can see that's only 1% or so that have this MTW designation. The dot in Minnesota is supposed to be Minneapolis, so but it's the only one in the state,
Yes.
so that is representing Minneapolis.
Yeah, it does. Detroit Lakes.
The program was established by Congress with three goals in mind. One is to achieve greater cost effectiveness and really reduce costs for the administration of federal housing programs, to increase housing choices for low-income families, and then also to help residents make progress towards economic self-sufficiency and increase earned income. The MTW program, as you could see, has been around for about 20 years, but there really hasn't been any systematic or qualitative analysis of the success of the program to date. So the question is MTW a more effective way of meeting residents' needs than traditional Section 8 or public housing remains largely unanswered. There has been some recent research done. In 2014, HUD hired Apt and Associates to complete a study of MTW innovations. And really what that included was really just a catalog of the innovations that were adopted by the 39 MTW designated agencies and the innovations that they were undertaking as part of the program. It didn't include any type of analysis, so no success measurement with that 2014 study. And then real recently, I guess it's a year ago now already, but the results of that just came out recently, but in July 2017, that study was expanded. And this time they dug a little deeper and to test the performance of the actual and the success of the MTW program in meeting the three initial goals, which are to increase housing choice, to reduce costs, and then to increase self-sufficiency. The study concluded that the MTW program has succeeded in meeting those goals. And particularly, the evidence showed that housing authorities, MTW agencies were better able, had better performance on self-sufficiency and housing choice outcomes, that these agencies were better able to serve families that are not reached by traditional federal housing assistance, such as Section 8 or public housing, and then that these agencies were better able to offer additional support services to exhibit higher earnings. So this study found that the program has been meeting the ultimate goals of the program. This slide shows some of the tremendous flexibility MTW agencies have that have this MTW designation, but they really range from very minor administrative changes to complete new business models for agencies. And agencies that have this MTW status, as you'll recall from my first slide, it allows housing authorities to waive federal regulations. So waive some of the administrative burdens of administering the program. So simplifying rent calculation, simplifying the deductions and the complicated process that goes with that, using alternative inspection processes that would allows agencies to award project-based vouchers opportunistically instead of competitively as we currently do. Agencies have developed entirely new programs that are outside of the federal regulations, developing landlord incentives programs, and really the sky's the limit on this. If the council were to obtain MTW designation, we could greatly improve the efficiency of our program by simplifying the rent calculation process, which is very complicated and time consuming. Another example would be to use alternative inspection processes. Currently, there's a piece of the federal regulation under the project-based voucher program that prohibits the council from inspecting its own units. So as you all know, the council owns 150 units of housing, and we currently contract out the inspections because the rules say we can't inspect them ourselves. Hiring a contractor is much more expensive than if we were to conduct the inspections ourselves. In fact, we do our own inspections because we are charged with maintaining the assets, so we do the inspections anyways to make sure that the assets are well taken care of. So it would really save us some money if we didn't have to contract that piece out. We could then use cost savings to provide service to families that are maybe working towards self-sufficiency or trying to increase their earned income. We could use the cost savings for that. We could develop new partnerships. So we could partner with a school district, for example, to house homeless students within a particular school district and provide them with voucher assistance. So really, like I said, the sky's the limit. We can just really do some innovative things if we had this status. So what are the opportunities and how do we get this moving to work status? As you can see by my initial slide, the program was launched in 2008, and since then, so for 20 years, there haven't been new opportunities for new MTW status. In 2016, Congress voted to expand the program by authorizing HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, to award an additional 100 agencies with MTW designation. Under the appropriations, because all of the existing 39 are large agencies, they HUD wanted to provide opportunity to some small agencies, or I should say Congress has a goal to award some to small agencies. So 97 of the 100 will be small to medium agencies, and that's agencies that have anywhere from 1 to 6,000 combined public housing and Section 8 units. Only 3 of the new slots are for what's considered large agencies over 6,000 units, and that includes the council. We have 6,500 vouchers, so we're just over the tipping point there. Um, the the expansions will be selected in cohorts or parts to implement the main three goals, as I talked about, which are cost effectiveness, self-sufficiency, and housing choice. So they'll be offered in chunks by HUD. So what's our potential of getting this authority? Many items impact how quickly HUD is likely to offer the additional cohorts or the expansion. Although the expansion was authorized under the previous administration, it's very likely that it will continue under the current administration. The program really focuses on efficiency of government programs. It also focuses on self-sufficiency, which are two components that are favored by the current administration. So we're confident that this will continue and be offered at some point soon. There's a strong push from the current administration, and maybe there have been some recent articles in the paper about implementing work requirements, work incentives, and even time limits on voucher holders and federal recipients of federal rent assistance. And so, if these items become a reality for us as a housing authority, having MTW status would really be a benefit to us to work under those new rules. Conversations have been occurring here in the Twin Cities there's 10 housing authorities administering the voucher program. And for a few years, 2 years, we've been having conversations on how we can serve families and landlords better that are working across jurisdictional lines. So we've been trying to collaborate better and be smarter about the federal dollars that are coming into our region. If these cohorts are offered by HUD soon, another thing that's in the 2016 Appropriations Act that allowed or that authorizes the 100-unit expansion is really a push for regionalization. So looking more broadly at rent assistance program from a regional perspective and a more broader perspective. Talking to people in Washington and members of Congress, we think we'd have a pretty good shot at getting one of those 3 large agency slots because we already have regional authority, and it would just bring partnerships closer within our region. It is likely that when these cohorts are offered, that small agencies will have the first opportunity to apply. That's what we're hearing at the federal level. So the downside is it might be several years before the council is able to apply independently. So the Appropriations Act allowed 7 years for HUD to offer these cohorts, so that brings us to 2023. So what we don't have a sense of is how quickly the 3 large agency slots or applications will be offered. There is another option for us that is out there right now that relies on the language that's written into the 2016 statutory language. And this language says that the Secretary may, at the request of a moving to work agency and one or more adjacent public housing agencies in the same area, designate that MTW agency as a regional agency. So that's a lot of words, but essentially what that means is HUD has the authority through this statute to award regional MTW status to Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, which could be extended to adjacent authorities, which includes the council. So that language is there. It hasn't been done anywhere in the country yet, but there's a lot of talk about consolidation, consortium, regionalization with the thought that agencies can be more effective and efficient if they're working together. So we could formally submit a letter to HUD requesting that HUD award this MTW expansion to adjacent housing authorities, which would mean us and potentially other housing authorities here in the region, which include Washington County CDA, Dakota County CDA, St. Paul PHA, and then several of the cities that have smaller programs like Bloomington, Richfield, St. Louis Park. I'm missing a few, Plymouth. And so all agencies, we've been having meetings talking about how this potential partnership could work. Some are interested, some are not, some are having conversations right now with their board, as I'm doing with you all. But we would have the ability to send a formal request to HUD to allow this. In my opinion, it would be a win-win for the council. If we were able to get this designation, it would be a win-win for the families that we serve, and it would provide for great flexibility in these times of extreme reduced funding that we're going through. Mobility and choice are really the cornerstones of the voucher program nationally. It's the largest rent assistance program in our nation today. And those are really the cornerstones, and having this MTW status would allow us flexibility to do that all better. Here are some considerations for you, and this is sort of what I want to have a little discussion or get your thoughts on. But submitting a formal request to the U.S. Department of Housing Authority does not commit the council to anything. So it's making a request to see if we can get some conversations started on getting this regional MTW designation to our agency. The details of how that regional partnership would work would have to be worked out as part of it, because again, this hasn't been done anywhere in the country, although we are hoping we can be the first. The goal for this initiative is for collaboration that will cover really a full range of regional strategies while maintaining independent governance and operating structures. So we would go in with the idea that we would continue to have our own structure and our own organizational structure, and MPHA will have the same, and whatever other housing authorities might be interested in buying into this. Before any changes would occur, before anything would happen with this, we would engage the public, we would engage the families that we serve fully. We would engage you all in further conversations before any policy changes would be made. And so, and the likelihood of needing congressional support is there. It would need the power of Congress and political support to allow this to happen. Our manager, Jennifer Keough, in the audience here, was in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago and had the opportunity through an industry organization that we belong to meet with members of Congress and along with colleagues in other agencies. And this is a creative idea that seems to have support from those that we've talked to that are anyway, I'll leave it at that, but it's likely we would need some congressional support to get this approved. So really, my purpose for coming to you today is to tell you about the MTW program, tell you about some of the flexibilities that could be awarded to us if we were able to obtain this designation. And what I'd like to propose is that we'll have some discussion, but what I'd like to come away from today is that we are able to submit a request letter to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development requesting that they consider this expansion. Knowing that before anything would happen with that, we would be back to you all for some additional policy discussion. And with that, Madam Chair, I will answer any questions you all may have.
Deal. We'll open it up to questions and comments for Terry. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What sorts of things has Minneapolis done with the flexibility that they have now?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Wolf, one of the big things that they've done is some rent reform. So they've done rent reform for their program. So I talked in the beginning about how complicated the rent calculation process is. It's based on income, but then there's all kinds of deductions, and we have people that come in with shoe boxes full of medical expenses that take hours for staff to calculate. So what you can do with the MTW program is they have a tiered rent structure. That is within $3,000 tiers. So if your income falls within this, your rent is this. If it falls within this, your rent is this. It takes away the complication of the deductions that go into that. So that's one of the innovations. With the funding becomes very flexible. So because they have public housing and Section 8, you can there's fungibility between the funds of the two programs. So with some of the administrative cost savings, they've been providing additional supports to residents of public housing, but also of the Section 8 program who are wanting to gain employment or work towards self-sufficiency. They are able to take some of those dollars and provide services. I mean, those are just a couple of the examples that they're doing now.
Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Try and crystallize these questions for you. One was, or is, when it refers to congressional support, is that support or is that congressional action or approval?
Councilmember Munt and Councilmember Chavez, it's not congressional approval. The language is already there in the 2016 Appropriations Act, so it's just congressional support
Okay,
to help us push through the idea.
okay. Follow-up question. Thank you. Then, you may recall over the years working together here, my preference for pilots, and I'm wondering, is this the MTW program or approach a bolt-on, a parallel path, or is it instead of what we currently have? Because I would be curious to have it tested, test drive it for a couple of years to see how it works. And then if it doesn't, that has to be unwound. We aren't crippled that we don't have any plan B. So I'm just curious about that.
So Madam Chair and Councilmember Chavez, the MTW innovations that have been accomplished nationally, are this thick. So what the thought is going into this, if we were able to get approval, the idea would be to start small on program innovations. So maybe we start with rent reform, and the other one that would be a great time saver is doing recertifications every 2 years or 3 years on families that are either elderly or disabled on a fixed income. That those two innovations and flexibilities alone would provide us with great administrative relief. But the other idea is if this were to get approved, there would be partnerships that would need to be developed with partner agencies because there needs to be a self-sufficiency component to this. And so there would need to be partnerships developed with workforce agencies and other partners to get at that self-sufficiency component.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? In that case, I have one, Terry. What happens to a voucher holder who's unable to find employment or unable to achieve sufficiency? Are they evicted?
Councilmember Munt, and under the new rules, so you maybe read the recent article, I saw you nodding your head, that was in the paper about the work requirements and work incentives. There's a large population of folks that would be excluded from that. That would likely be elderly persons or disabled persons. There would also be exception requirements. So I'm certain it would come out with people could claim request exceptions to the rules. So the reality is, I mean, the Housing Authority, we serve 6,500 families, and we have very few families on zero income, because the reality is you can't live on zero income for long periods of time. But there are going to be some families that are not disabled, that can't work for a variety of reasons. And the Housing Authority will have exception policies in place to deal with those. And, what it really all depends on is how the rule is written from HUD and how that comes down to the housing authorities. But they're not going to get it passed without having some avenue for exceptions to that.
I'm also wondering if the efficiencies we would realize, would that be invested in providing more housing to families?
Councilmember Munt, that's an option. So you can take administrative dollars and spend it on subsidy, and you can take subsidy dollars and spend it on administration. So those would be the types of policy discussions we would have with you all to decide as an agency how we want to utilize the funds that are saved through that.
Any other questions or comments? So Terry, it sounds like you are looking for permission from us to proceed with an application for moving to work status. Is that right?
Councilmember Munn, I don't think I need approval, but I would like your support. So I guess that's what I'm asking for, support in that initiative, yes.
Are folks supportive? I see heads nodding.
Nodding yes, that is.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to indulge you. I apologize for being late. I got caught up in traffic. I would like to be recorded as voting aye on 1 and 2 of the business items, if the committee agrees.
Absolutely. Our next item is the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan Public Engagement effort, an update and discussion. Emmett and Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You want to lead off?
Sure. Chair Munt and members of the committee, thank you for having us here this afternoon. Today we're here to talk about our engagement work that we've been doing on the Regional Parks Policy Plan update. We also want to go over the timeline. So I should probably, there we go. So we're going to review and discuss our engagement activities to date, as well as hear from you with your questions, and review our process. So
Now, we were here, I can't remember if it was last month or the month before, and we had a very nice chat. Went back to our desks and heard the message that maybe we didn't talk about community engagement enough or convincingly enough. And I will admit that this is not we heard that message in a couple of different venues. And so we're going to give you more detail today. More is available and more will be available as we finish up all the reporting. But that's at the heart of today's discussion. And we're going to tease you with a little bit of what's coming. So here we are. We've been working on the left-hand side of this timeline. You're not meant to read all those words on there, but the biggest paragraph that's on the lower side of it, that's what we've been doing, all those words, including community engagement. But we really consider the community engagement as part of the overall input into this plan. We're holding the community engagement kind of in equal measures with all of the other work that we've been doing, engaging with other folks. So in that spirit, I'm going to walk through an expanded version of that longer paragraph there. Oh, and that was it. We have been engaging with council members in a few different ways. We do have a council member work group. Councilmember Wolf is our chair. We have council members Elkins and Melander also on the work group. This is our first stop for policy discussion or for strategy discussion for the big issues. How are we going to have a discussion working issues into the policy plan, and how is it considered from a policymaker point of view? And we've been meeting pretty regularly, once a month since December, and unless they get tired of us, we'll be meeting through November. Community Development Committee, here we are today. We're having a number of discussions. This happens to fit on the council member level. We're also going around and meeting with the various advisory committees. MPOSC is our obvious one, Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission. We have a sort of standing agenda item where we come and talk about what's up that month. They're important because they're the ones that are they kick off the official recommendation that leads to CDC, that leads to the council. We've been to the Land Use Advisory Committee once for a little introduction, but then a couple of other times as well. And because, it's a little more complicated than parks take up land, we're intersecting with them on how does the parks policy plan intersect with the comprehensive plan and with the kind of complex trade-offs that they have to do with their in the planning of land use. And so we've been in front of them. We had a really nice discussion about the issue and topic of regional balance at our last one, where we got quite nicely into it. So I will say a variety of folks around this table are on a variety of these venues here. I don't want to necessarily march us through this. I will, but if you want to comment on any of the things you've seen, please do.
Just another topic that came up at the Land Use Advisory Committee was the importance of this remaining a nature-based system. People talked about the importance of environmental resiliency, uh, being able to adapt to climate change. It was a kind of a high-level, heady conversation around the importance of natural resources.
Equity Advisory Committee. We've had 2 visits to the Equity Advisory Committee. We will have one additional one in July to overview the plan as it comes forward. And this has been a really interesting one because they focus very much on process. Who's been involved in the process? Have you talked to these folks? Have you asked these questions at a very high level in a way that was really a wonderful sort of advice discussion. And so we look forward to going back in July.
I just want to mention one thing that's parallel with the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission, where Councilmember Wolf is our liaison. The that's a group that is really focused on equity and public engagement. Every master plan that goes through there, the first question that they ask is, tell us a little bit about how you engaged the public as you developed this plan. And that just is an important theme that I think is going to ring through in the Parks Policy Plan update.
We have a small legion of internal staff members working on the policy plan. We've got a leadership team of folks who kind of manage day to day the project direction. The finance team, because Parks has such a high granting proportion of its work, there is a team of people working on finance. There's a lot of overlap between these teams, by the way, but they're particularly focused on creating the program guide, which will be a implementation manual of sorts.
So the program guide for the regional parks policy plan has a lot of operational details in it. So we're going to break that off and put it into an administrative guide that can ride parallel to that and be a little bit more flexible in terms of easier to update. Doesn't have to go through a public hearing process in the event that there's some grant program changes. So we think it'll offer greater flexibility as well as ease of operation for the agencies and for the system.
This next one we're going to talk about in a little more detail in just a couple slides, but I just want to say there's the internal staff team working on community engagement is an entirely different kind of group of people and effort, reaching out directly into communities, and we'll get into that in a couple minutes. And Claudia Fuentes is here in the audience in case we get into the details in great amount. So that's a particular thing we'll talk about. This has been a topic that's continued to come up. What's the intersection of regional trails in the parks and trail system and the RBTN, the Regional Bicycle Transportation Network? And it's a wonderful intersection discussion, ripe for integration and collaboration with our friends at MnDOT and with the agency. So that's a group that's working together. One of the backbones of what we've been doing is working with the park implementing agencies on slogging through all the language in the plan. Reviewing with great excitement the policy language that's in the plan, and it's we have been meeting more or less every couple of weeks since January. We've been exploring their advice on how the experience of the language we have in the plan is, and we'll take that information back and we're working it into the plan updates that we're working on. So they're owners and operators of the regional parks, and so they have a very special role in our engagement. And then finally, in the list of official things, boards and commissions. We offered to each of the implementing agencies that we would come out and sit down with their advisory commissions or their governing boards to kind of hear straight from them where they're at with the thing. There's 10 agencies. We ended up with 4 acceptances. Most of the agencies said, we'll just give our board an update, it'll be fine. Some of them said, please present and please talk about these particular things. So as we've gone about there, it's very interesting to come out to folks who are operating the systems as policy advisors and kind of hear just what's in the front of their minds. So in Washington County last week, we got into a very interesting discussion about the effects of a changing climate on our regional park system. How do we express that in our parks plan? And we do. We don't have it as talking points regularly, but those kinds of conversations we are taking back and sharpening the language that we have in the plan. And so that's what's informing what you'll see coming forward in a couple months.
Yeah, I'll just mention, we were also in Scott County and Carver County, and we heard the importance of our Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund program, and also an expression of some of the challenges that face some of the smaller agencies, that there is money available to acquire land, but developing those less mature systems is really hard. And they just spoke to that challenge that the amount of time it's going to take to realize some of their master plans is a long time, and they expressed frustration to that. My only other comment is just I was really impressed with the level of understanding that the advisory commissions had about the specific regional parks policy plan. There are people that have actually read our policy plans and were conversant in it. So.
Oh, I forgot also to mention one of the most exciting things was when a commissioner showed up at one of our counties and said, well, I was on your website and I found the plan and I downloaded it and I've read it and I have these specific 3 questions. And they were pretty deep in their questions. So we're all for the website. All of the things that we talked about previously, hang on a second, go back. All of the things that we just talked about, they're kind of official mechanisms. They're official boards, they're staff people that are getting paid for things. And to some extent, the community speaks through them. The implementing agencies are constantly in contact with the users of the parks. They're doing work to incorporate folks in the planning of regional parks. But we wanted to do some additional community engagement of our own so that we can ask questions particular to the level of plan that we're writing. And so,
thank you.
And so this next set of slides is just about what we're calling 2018 community engagement. And there's a few different categories, and I just want to keep those categories in depth. This is a high-level overview. We're just about done with producing the summary report of this work. And so I'll stay tuned for that. If you can stay tuned for that, I'm going to present sort of the approach and then how it's incorporated in the work. We did a little questionnaire. It was pretty informal with the implementing agencies. How do you engage folks in your existing plans, in your master plans, in your comp plan updates? And various agencies came back with various kind of approaches, and it's kind of neat to see all the different means by which they're engaging with communities. But we also did so we kind of have some sense of what the agencies are doing in this arena. There's another kind of work that we did, which was following up with stakeholders that we engaged when we last did the plan. So there was quite a bit of engagement during the 2014 work that led up to 2015 adoption of the existing plan. We went back to, go back. We went, maybe I should, yeah. This will be smoother the second time through. we went back to that same group of stakeholders to kind of ask, are you still interested? Have you been following this? What do you think? What should we think about? And they basically gave us a kind of feedback of how we're doing from their perspective. There's another kind of work that we did, which was going to folks who we think would be regional parks users, but they're not necessarily in regional parks. So we talked with a Richfield Women's Group, an adult basic education group, focus group conversations with ECFE, Early Childhood Family Education, in suburban places. So these are all audiences that are primed, we think, for using regional parks more. And the purpose of this was to ask them, what would you want to use in parks? What do you think? What do you know about parks? How would you go about using it? So that's one kind of outreach. And then a kind of next version is we literally went into parks, into regional parks, and did surveys of park users. Now that you're here in the park, what do you like? What do you think we should spend money on? What do you think? How's it going here? What are your impressions? So they were users of parks, and we're in the middle of processing that for a summary report to be done shortly. I want to. This is a little bit of a teaser from the work, from what's going to be in the report, and you do not have to read all the tiny words on the screen. But I do want to give you a sense of why are we doing all this different kind of work. And in these two charts, they're kind of just basic "who are you" charts. And on the left-hand chart, the darker bars, the blue ones, are folks that we surveyed in parks. The green bars are folks that we went to talk to them. And if you look on that left-hand chart, the tall bar on the sort of right-hand side, that dark blue chart, the question is, what is your race and or origin? The tall blue chart for parks users is white. So we found proportionally a lot of white users when we went out to survey in parks. And the little blue bars on the left hand, little blue columns, indicate that we found relatively few, it's proportionally, it goes up to 100%. So we found relatively few other users in parks. And this is not a exhaustive scientific survey, but it gives you a sense of who we ended up talking to for this set of surveys. The right-hand chart flips the script a little bit, and it asks, what's your household earning? So in this one, the people we surveyed in parks is the lighter blue columns, and the dark columns are the focus groups. So the surveys were folks we saw in parks. The focus groups were folks who we went to talk to. And so if you tease through this information, what you see is folks who ended up in parks tended to make a little bit more money than folks who we met that weren't in parks. So we're catching different income groups to ask the same questions to inform the policy work. That's a little advertisement for wait for the report and you'll find out what they said. But a tiny tease for that is going to be, this chart is only people that we surveyed in parks. So if you remember, this is the group that we have, large percentage of white population, larger percentage of slightly higher incomes, and these are the folks that we found in the parks. We asked them this question. This is one of the questions we asked. Of a whole list of items, which should be prioritized for funding? Which should we spend money on? And I just want to point that one bar, and that's that little tiny blue column that's sitting there. That is the column that says, we think we should spend more money on outreach and advertising. And so if we just did this one survey in parks, we would only have caught folks who don't think advertising is much of a big thing or outreach. But remember, we're talking to people who are already in parks. They know the park's there. They're going to the park. They're happy with it. Don't spend money on that. Spend money on the trail. Spend money on more bathroom time. Spend money on cleanup, uh, habitat restoration. And so the reason that we have all these different methods is we're trying to get the sort of overall issues of what's necessary. We'll take those overall issues, put them with the discussion we've had with the communities, with the implementing agencies, with the boards and commissions, with council members, with the advisory committees, and that's what we're putting into the redrafting of the policy language that we have. Remember, this is an update, not a substantial rewrite. So the policy questions that we have, we're drawing out information from this to inform those updates. And that's most of my thunder. In the last policy plan, there were a number of specific strategies that were inserted to increase equitable use. And I'm just using this as an excerpt of how that information intersects with language that's in the plan. As we've gone around and talked to various folks, we've actually heard a lot of support for convening topical stakeholder meetings. So, in other words, convening discussions with the implementing agencies to talk about topics that would be of interest to getting better practice into the plan. We think a lot of the survey work, a lot of the information we're gathering would actually have a really fine audience in those topical stakeholder groups. A lot of the information has to do with that we gathered tends to favor things like operations, things that we don't necessarily touch every day, but the larger stakeholder group does. Also, in those topical stakeholder meetings, we also have the opportunity to bring in other voices into that meeting, not just the data. So this whole thing sort of fits together as eventually a big matrix. But the intersection of what we're doing, what we've committed to in the policy plan, and what we're finding out is, I think, where the interesting work's going to be for the next, number of years before the next policy plan update.
I'll just comment that first one, that strategies that people want us to pursue, pretty much every group wants us to get that equity grant program up and running. The implementing agencies, the equity advocates, as well as some of the stakeholder groups. So, message received.
I have 2 slides on timeline. I just want to say we're still on this same timeline. The May is a big drafting month for us right now. June is going to be a kind of big review month and catching up to things. July, we're going to be setting out into the public sphere. So starting on July 12th, MPOSC will hear, so during June, we'll be visiting MPOSC. We'll have a committee of the whole. We'll be back here. We'll be doing overviews of the actual content of the plan. What's changed, what's in there, what should you pay attention to, why is it there? That's June. July is unveil this for the public hearing process. And hopefully MPOSC, CDC will both recommend the update for release. July 25th, we're scheduled for the full council to adopt the draft for public comment, and then the public comment period happens, and then we restart. Of course, we'll be working all the way through, but September 17th, the public hearing is tentatively scheduled to be at the CDC, right here. And then we will respond to that, do final comments, respond to the public comments, and then take it through one more time for adoption, scheduled for November 28th, 2018. And that is the end of our slides.
Folks, are there any questions or any discussion? Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to laser in on thanks for doing this. So thanks for coming back. On the community engagement piece, which is, I think, the piece that's probably closest, nearest to my heart, are we done with that? Or is that going to continue through this active, through the public hearing process and soliciting comments, et cetera?
The community engagement work, the surveying and the kind of official mechanisms, is gathering that data is complete. Now, what we have though is as we incorporate the information into the policy plan, we're going to be going back through and talking with the various committees about what came of it. And so the opportunity for input exists kind of in parallel with all the other kinds of input that we had. Equity Advisory Committee was the most articulate, the most interested in exactly how are people going to know about this, exactly who's going to happen, and then the other dimension to it is there's a kind of reporting back to the people who participated in that work, not in the surveys because they sort of like came and went, but the focus groups, the stakeholder advisors, they will receive a kind of report back. And Claudia's been very patient in getting information for that response back. But that's another venue that it's available.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Well, Dan and Emmett, I want to thank both of you for presenting to the Equity Advisory Committee. It was one of the most robust discussions that we've had. And I think the roots of the discussion were grounded in Raintree Salk's study, which showed that communities of color are underrepresented at our parks. And there's a real sense that we need to dig deeper and not just talk to the users, but to the people who aren't using. It's really no different than what we do with transit when we survey people who aren't riding to find out what would make them come to our parks. We know that it's two things. It's first of all that people are not aware of the opportunities at the parks. And it's also grounded in people not finding what they need at our parks. One of the things that I will never forget is when there was a discussion about Native American folks in the Phillips neighborhood not going by way of Hiawatha Light Rail to canoe at Fort Snelling. And when we actually talked to the folks, they said, well, we're not canoeing because we don't know how to swim. Now, that wasn't obvious to folks, but it becomes obvious once you talk to the people who aren't using our parks. So there's a lot of interest in that at the Equity Advisory Committee. And we also have an ambassador vacancy, and there was a lot of interest in helping to circulate that job posting in order to get somebody who is rooted in community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you. To kind of coordinate or align a couple of potential data points, when we're looking at that slide, for example, you presented this afternoon, we're talking about that shows income, the bar graph. If we think about it, it's one thing for me to even be aware of the park, so that's one challenge. Next thing is transportation. Even if I'm aware and I want to visit and I don't have a vehicle, that's another physical hurdle. Those two aside, if I'm working two jobs because of my income status, it makes it pretty difficult for me to have even time available for that. So when we are analyzing the survey results, are those survey, I'm just curious, are those survey results taken on a Friday afternoon, a Sunday afternoon, or a Monday morning at 8:30 when there's all kinds of crazy birders out there or something? It's a totally different dynamic on what the source of that data will be. So, and to inform us about non-use, potential use, it's going to take a chunk of work, which you may not have the resources to do that. But I think that's where the real opportunity exists. Thank you.
Councilmember Elkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just say, I've been spending a lot of time with this thing lately, as you can see by all the sticky tabs and everything. And the more I go through it, I really appreciate how well written it really is. It really is easy to read and makes the essential points.
Good. I'm trying to resist the urge to have you tell our plain language readers that, but we'll discuss later.
You've got to consider that he's been reading government for
Yeah,
most
I've
of
been
his
doing this
adult
for a
life.
long time.
Anything else, folks? Seeing no other business, we stand adjourned.